Film Festival. For those of you who don't know, Independence Care System is a Medicaid-managed long-term care plan, and we provide services to about 7,000 people with physical disabilities and senior adults living in 4 boroughs of New York City, everything except for Staten Island. If you live in Staten Island and you want services, I apologize in advance. Don't come and ask me how come we don't provide services in Staten Island, because I don't know. So ICS provides a whole bunch of services, including services specialties for people with physical disabilities. We have an MS program and a spinal cord injury program. We have a comprehensive wheelchair program. We have a women's health program. And we were the first managed long-term care program to contract with CDPAS to provide services to people with physical disabilities in the community. So we're proud of that history as well. So I have a couple of things to tell you. One is that ICS has a whole bunch of information out in the lobby if you would like to get it. Regina Weiss, who's our Director of External Communications, will be out there answering questions. We'd also like to thank ReelAbilities, is that right, Ravit? Yes. Oh, see that? How exciting. For having us, and we're excited to work with this panel today. It's an incredibly esteemed group of people to talk about the future of advocacy, and we are thrilled to be a part of it. And my next job is to introduce you to somebody who is a personal hero of mine. Victor Khaleesi and I have been friends for a lot of years. His hair was black when I first met him. Mine was the same color, miraculously enough. I don't know why. Victor is a strong, passionate advocate for the community of people with disabilities, and we're so, so lucky to have him as the Commissioner of the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. And we thank you all for coming today, and here's Victor.
Everyone, thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, ReelAbilities, for making this a reality, constantly having this film festival and showing your presence in the community. 1 second. Okay, well, there you go. Wow, I sound loud. My job is here to talk about advocacy and how important it is. I remember when I first got started in advocacy, I didn't want anything to do with people with disabilities when I first got hurt. I didn't want to think I was like them. And that changed as I got older and started to realize that I needed to be a voice. And that voice came when I started working for an organization called Eastern Paralyzed Veterans Association. And I met Lorraine Looney. Lorraine was my advocate. Lorraine showed me what it was like to move forward, how important it was to be that voice. And it all started because I couldn't get into an ice hockey rink and play sled hockey. And Lorraine said, that's not going to happen. And it doesn't anymore because of Lorraine. And she showed me that way and guided me. It was, Looney, I'm sorry. It was. I just, you know how much Looney love I have. So that's how I got started, and Eastern Paralyzed Veterans Association showed me the way, and eventually became the United Spinal Association. And as I think about how they've changed through the years and how advocacy has changed through the years, it worries me. We don't have enough young people with disabilities out in the field rising up to be able to be that voice. It's important because I know through city government how people like Carmousy have pushed me to do more, how people like Anna Faye have pushed me to do more, how people like, the list goes on, and I can't think, without them pushing me, I'm not the advocate that I am today. And I need younger people to come up, and that's how come having people like Tucker around and having that young generation come up and be the next advocates are important. I know that we have a great panel here today, and I can't stress how important advocates mean to the city, because without your voice, I can't get anything done. And without your voice, I don't know the problems that exist in our community. And without your voice, we can't get anything done. And the mayor will tell you that he believes in advocates, and I believe in advocates. And the stronger we have advocates, like Lawrence Carver-Long and the panel that we have up here today, and Alex and Sean and everybody else, we don't exist. So I'm going to turn everything over to Lawrence, I guess, for the panel discussion. So I want to thank everybody for having me here today. All right.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, ReelAbilities, and thank you, Independence Care System. It's an honor for me to be back here in New York City and here with ReelAbilities yet again. to talk about an issue that is probably more important than ever before right now, advocacy, and certainly passing the torch. Personally speaking, I had cerebral palsy since I was born, but didn't get involved. It wasn't part of the disability community until I was 35 years old. And other people shouldn't have to wait that long. So part of this panel, I think, is to really show the importance of community, the importance of coming together, and the importance of what we can do, the fact that we can do more together than we can on our own. I'm going to start by asking one question of each panelist and go down the line, and then eventually we'll open up to y'all. So the first question for the man to my right, Alex Elegudin, is Alex. We're at a film festival. If you're looking in, sort of the world at large, right? Superhero movies are all the rage. Marvel's got their thing. DC's got their thing. So I'm going to ask you, sort of in that vein, and along with the topic that we're talking about today, what's your origin story? What made you an advocate?
Well, I certainly wasn't born an advocate. I sustained my disability at 19 in a deer-related car accident. And even then, I wasn't automatically, after rehab and everything, like, okay, I'm going to go and advocate for people. I had a chip on my shoulder in similar ways like Victor. I wanted to get back to work. I wanted to beat disability. That was my goal. I was an engineering student at the time, and I changed my major to law. I went to law school to become an attorney. And even when I became an attorney at first, I didn't go for the reason of becoming an advocate. I wanted to be an attorney working at some firm, making money like anybody else. The problem is, along the way, I had seen a lot of people, including my friends. When I was in rehab, there was about 8 or 9 guys that I met, and some of them went to nursing homes, some of them went to other kind of settings, and they were all kind of struggling. And I kept coming back to Mount Sinai, which is where I did my rehab, to kind of see how people were doing, how are other people with disabilities who are recently injured doing. And it was just something that was pulling my heartstrings for many, many years. That there wasn't enough service, there wasn't enough advocacy. The aspect of transition from becoming disabled to just integrating into society wasn't good enough. And one day, after working as an attorney for about a year or two, unrelated to disability, I was like, you know what? This isn't how I'm supposed to use my skills. I really want to help people in different ways. I want to help people with disabilities kind of live better lives. And I came together with my friend Yannick, and we started an organization called Wheeling Forward, and have really gone a long way to really try to change things. So the origin is something that is humbling. I mean, it went from visiting people in hospital rooms and visiting people in different settings and being like, you know what, let me go talk to their social worker and try to help them because they can't talk on their own behalf. And from that is where eventually you're talking to the director of a hospital, then you're talking to a local official, and you're talking to somebody else in the government. And it really is just about showing up and trying for me and seeing different problems and being like, you know what, I'm gonna try to fix that problem. So that's kind of the brief
being in a place where you can connect the dots and start making sense of, wait, this is connected to that, and if we got to go over here, we've got to work on this as well, right? So it's understanding the scope of those issues and how they're interrelated.
Right, and then believing that you can make a difference. I mean, sometimes it can be overwhelming when you're facing a big institution, or especially when you're facing the government. It seems like, what is my voice going to do? And it's pretty shocking how much you really can do. Recently, within the last year, I've actually endeavored onto a slightly new project. I work for the City of New York. I work for the Taxi and Limousine Commission as the accessibility manager. And what I would say from that, I deal with taxis and helping the New York City taxi fleet become more accessible. But what I would say from that, just being present inside this big government agency as a person with a disability changes the culture. Having somebody in a wheelchair be at meetings, having somebody be there at hearings, somebody next to, whether it's the commissioner or other senior staff, I mean, that in and of itself just brings huge change, even if I didn't say a word. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like, that's the kind of change you have to believe in. Just your presence, combined with the aptitude and passion that you have, really can drive change across city agencies, across the government, and more importantly, to be honest, in the private sector.
Thank you. So, John, now we've known each other for a little while, right? And you've had, like myself, you've had cerebral palsy since birth, but I know you from theater. Right? You've since gone on to other things. What made you an advocate?
Well, actually, the day that I met you, when we did our first Q&A, this is our next Q&A, was the first time that I've ever performed publicly, ever. So I was not an actor. I was not, I was a writer who never wrote. And what happened?
There's a lot of those.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Because I was so afraid of, I had a lot to say, but I was really afraid of how it would be received. And advocacy, I thought, why address the obvious? I walk around with 2 ski poles my entire life. I felt like that was my advocacy. And, I was quite used to having a lot of one-on-one conversations on the streets of New York. And I thought, if I can just live my life as happily as possible, maybe that could be my advocacy. But as I went on, and actually through Visible, is where I realized, in talking to fellow advocates.
And we should say Visible Theater.
I'm sorry, there were 45 members total, 15 with disabilities. And what I loved about it, it was more like the real world. I was not very comfortable with disability-only groups or any kind of separatism because, to me, that wasn't how the real world worked. And what I liked about Visible is that it was everybody working together, individually and collectively, in this incredibly diverse environment. And actors, studio actors, award-winning playwrights, and a lot of them, to be honest with you, were writing things. They were my role models as far as I could see. And writing things in their journals like, I hate my body, I hate my life, maybe it's because of my disability. And I thought, my God, I look up to you, and if this is how you're doing, how's everybody else? You know what I mean? So it kind of gave me this light bulb first to want to have positive dialogue with them, to share how I saw them, and how I felt the world saw them. But then on a bigger scale, realizing that, wow, just because I dealt with my disability in a certain way doesn't mean that everybody. So I thought it was this incredible blessing, this perk, this privilege, because I would get to cut the lines at Disney World, and I don't know, I saw all the good stuff, right? I can still get sold out tickets. I just got tickets to Blondie. But so
she's telling all our secrets.
I know. Yeah, I know. Okay, so but we're on the inside track here. Everybody here, welcome.
Don't do that.
Yes. So when I always saw it as sort of the ace up my sleeve, and I wondered, why isn't everybody else feeling the same way? And it was because I grew up in this bubble where my parents told me anything was possible, and when I wanted to be a ballerina, they just got me a ballerina costume for Halloween. They never said, that's not for you, don't do, you know what I mean? So I didn't understand that other people had different experiences or did not have the love and support that I have had. And speaking of origins, I just want to give a shout out to a lady in the audience who I just found out was on my bus in elementary school and remembers me from my bang days, bangs till 15. So, no, but long story short is that it was through Visible that I realized that we all have different experiences, but also what the power of sharing your story can be, because what we performed was called True Story Project, and everybody's stories were so amazing that I felt like, what is my fluffy story going to do? And it was just a simple story about my body as a temple, and it really shocked me. I couldn't even hear my own voice the first time I performed, and yet 5 women, it was at actually NYU's Initiative for Women with Disabilities, and 5 women came up to me and said, thank you for sharing your story. I really related to every word of it. And that's when I realized that our stories, our advocacy is bigger than we are. And it's not about how's my hair and do people like me, but what can we do as ourselves that can benefit the greater whole and everybody. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Wonderful. Danny? Hey, Danny. So, actor, rebel rouser, you like a good righteous ruckus? What got you from simply wanting to work as an actor to doing what you're doing now, right? Going to forums,
Going back to
causing a fuss,
stories,
right? Yeah.
we were on a field trip to the Science Museum. I was
How old were you?
bitten by a tiny bearded spider, and no. Actually, it's very similar in a sense, because there's a lot of, your stories become your interactions with people, right? I mean, watching my mom advocate for me as a very young person was sort of the spark that gave me my own voice. Knowing what my mom had to deal with in the 60s, I have two older brothers, and my middle brother has Down syndrome. So she was already on the path of advocacy before she even got to me. So I learned a lot by example. I learned a lot by my interactions with people. And as a young person, you very selfishly, I think, advocate for yourself. And so I started that path of advocating for myself, and of course my older brother. But then I saw that it wasn't just about me as time goes on, and getting into show business, of course, I saw that the kinds of things that were coming my way were very stereotypical, a lot of them derogatory, and I would pass on them or fight for them in a different way, try to get producers and writers to change scripts and change ideas, and I hate to use the word PC because it's such a backlash, but to make them, I think, more palatable to me as a performer, that I could see myself playing these roles rather than...
Is there a specific script or a specific incident that comes to mind with the penny drop?
There's quite a few. Just to name one that I did not do, there was a television show called Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. That TV show called me and asked me if I would do a role, and I looked at the role, and the character was a circus performer. But throughout the script, he's constantly coming on to the daughter in the show, and the daughter at the time is 14. And I thought, that's very disturbing to me. You're making this guy out to be a pedophile and then sort of laughing about it. So I asked them to make the changes, and they, did the classic. Next, they were fine with not making any changes and not using me. They couldn't see the script the way I saw it. And there's been a few like that. I've actually had to put in my contract on one show that I will not bite the other character on the butt at any time. It was something I had to actually get in my contract so that I didn't show up on set and have the directors and producers say, yeah, I know we talked about it, but we would like to go back to that original idea where you bite him on the butt. And and it's not the first time a character that I've played has been asked to bite somebody on the butt. So, right? Is that the weirdest thing? So, there's been little things like that.
Everyday life, then. How often does that
Right,
yeah.
right. That's how I got my prom date. And funny story, not so funny, but Picket Fences was a show where they had a little person character that I auditioned for, where the character bites Lauren Holly on the butt. And then he asked her for a date. And it works. So I was like, had I known in high school that this was the way, I would have started an earlier path, I guess. It was disturbing to me, and it was very early in my career that I auditioned, and I gave this long diatribe to the casting assistant, who could care less. Set me on my way, and it was shot as is. So stories like that led me to see that it wasn't just about me, too. It was about other people, people with disabilities not being cast in roles, not getting opportunities. Like an audition for a character in a wheelchair, it takes place on the second floor of an older building. You're clearly not going to see any actors in wheelchairs if there's no access to that second floor audition. So things like that, and things like the Oscars So White campaign, especially this year, have really sort of sparked me to redouble my efforts, in my mind, to make disability a topic of the inclusion and diversity discussion, where we are, I would say, 99% of the time left out of that discussion, and we're almost like a footnote. And so that's sort of, long story short, as she says.
Well, and to put disability in its rightful place. So, and as I often say, is that disability puts the D in diversity. That's at the front of the word.
You do often say that.
I do that.
You're
Yes.
the guy that says that.
And not at the end, not as an afterthought. So I think we've got to reframe it, right? Refocus it in people's minds.
Right, and to what she said, it's about talking to people too. It's like each one of us can be an advocate on a daily basis, and I'm sure many of you are. Being open to questions and being open to explaining stuff to people, because people need to understand, so that you're welcomed into the community. They need to understand you, because there's a certain amount of fear, I think, that you've all experienced that comes with disability. People are afraid of it because they don't know about it or understand it. They sort of lump us into one group, and so they need that extra push, as it were, to welcome them in a way into the fold.
Yeah. And anybody can become disabled in an instant.
And that's part of the other fear too. Like, is that going to happen to me? That's the other fear.
Yeah, Superman falls off the horse. Ooh, what do we do?
Right.
Yeah. And so people have that.
It's a world-changing moment for people.
Yeah. So.
Can I just say though,
Sure.
I don't think that should be used as a threat or a reason to pay attention. I don't think you have to have the
No, I think it's just part of
yeah.
what's going on inside people.
Right. And I mean, I do think it's very true that it's one of the only minorities that we can join. But I don't know. I think we should be careful how we use that, because I don't think you have to have the same experiences as someone to have empathy and to understand the importance. So anyway. Okay.
Good point, good point.
It's not a requirement. Yeah. Anna Faye.
Yes.
You've been doing this a little while. What got you started?
A little while. I'm still doing it. I guess, like Danny, I have to thank my mother for part of the reason, at least. My mother was a woman before her time. She was always walked into a room and you knew she was there somehow, somewhere. It could be a party, it could be anything. And she was, I would go shopping with my mother and for clothing and whatever, you'd find me among the clothes where nobody could see me, because my mother was arguing about or bargaining for the price or whatever. And one of the first things I do remember about my mother, who always advocated, was always advocating for me, was that she was on the phone with somebody, the executive director of the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, which nobody remembers anymore. Now it's known as God knows what, but it was the foundation that supported things, fought things for people with polio, which is what I had and got it the year 7 years. Anyways, and she was on the phone with this woman, and I could hear her voice getting louder and louder, and then suddenly it was really loud, and she said, "Give me your job to sit on the phone all day telling people you have no money for anything." And I thought, wow, she's really pissed. And that was really angry about, and I thought, all right, and so I kind of grew up with that being okay, and that's, I think, important. But I also grew up with, obviously as a child growing up with a disability, I also grew up with a lot of thank yous and being very grateful for OVR because they paid for my college.
You should say what OVR is.
Excuse me, now it's what is it? Thank you, younger people. Okay. Access. Right, that's what it was then. And just everything, somebody held a door open for me. It was, oh God, thank you. Whatever it was, this was this sense of, thank you for just letting me be in the world or something. I don't know. But at the same time...
You're welcome.
Right, you're welcome. me feel better. I'm not sure. But so yeah, there was that. But at the same time, I was, it annoyed me that I couldn't get in, for example, into places that I wanted to see. You know, the public library, museums. I lived in New York. I wanted to be part of New York, really part of New York. I couldn't get into a lot of places, and I thought, wow, why not? You know, this is not, I mean, I knew why not, but I didn't like it. And I went to a college that was not totally accessible. It had a big step at the front of it, and somebody needed to come down and put a wooden ramp there every day so that I could get in and out of it. But I didn't go to the school I wanted to because it was not accessible, totally. And that was wrong to me. It just plain was wrong. One day, moving forward, and I recall this statement clearly. It was a Sunday, and I was chilling out, and I got a phone call from a man who was a generation older than me, who had a disability. I knew him, and he was the president of a group called Architectural Barriers Committee. His name was Julie Shaw. Carr remembers Julie, right? And we had met at, I don't know, a couple of places probably. But he's invited me to become a part of his committee. And this committee was a group of people, very small group of people, like maybe 5 or 10 at the most, who were focusing on getting curb cuts for New York City. Although there weren't any. You'd cross the street using driveways. Yeah. You would just go looking for driveways to find a way across the street. Yeah. And he, you know, said, "So we only meet once or whatever," and I was kind of reluctant, but it sounded interesting, and so I went to some of their meetings, and I got hooked, and I enjoyed it. I felt good about being part of something that not only was for me, but it was a much bigger thing that I had no idea how big it would be or what it would mean to me in my lifetime. But that is how I got started. And the first big action, I just want to make one point. It was in a good place, I think, in the history of civil rights. The 70s, we were part of, coming off the civil rights movement in the middle of the women's rights movement, and so the notion of civil rights was there, and why not us? You know, this was so the first action week that I participated in, which really put me over the top, guys, was it was a gasoline shortage in New York City, and we were not exempt from the people who were able to get gas. Since there was no public transportation at all, we relied on cars and vans and special transportation to get where we were going. And yet the state did not see that it was important for us to be exempt. I beg your pardon, like what? So we ended up, those organizations, and I was with the Architectural Barriers Committee, and it was DIA and maybe and EPDA, and we ended up, we actually organized the first demonstration that I can recall, anyway, in our history, and it was successful. And I had probably never felt that euphoric in my life, but it was an amazing experience. Just being with a group of people holding up traffic on 6th Avenue was great. Yay! I mean, it was great, and they kind of had to pay attention to us. So that's, I mean, it's been a part of an incredibly important and a great part of my life.
And I guess, the thinking is, if we can't get anywhere, you can't get anywhere. in there.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Would you like to join us? We can plan some more.
It's tough. Yeah. Christy Cruz.
How are you?
What's your origin story?
Well, I would probably have to say that I didn't realize I became an advocate until I was about 23 years old, and I realized I went up against the Board of Education for testing accommodations for a GED exam that I wanted to take.
Can we maybe get another mic for Christy?
Can you hear me? Oh, I think that's better. Is that better?
You know what, pull it away from you.
That's it. Take two. Let's try that again.
All right. Hello. For me, advocacy came at 23 years of age. I wanted to take my GED so that I can attend college, and I realized in the process of doing so, the testing center where I wanted to take the exam wasn't wheelchair accessible. So I had to go make numerous trips to the Department of Board of Education, repeatedly ask them, could you assist me in getting accommodated to take my exam? And after a 5-year battle, sounds crazy, I know. You're making me relive all my thoughts in my head.
And we're not talking, I mean, we're not talking the 1970s here.
No, we're talking about 2003.
2003.
So,
And in a 5-year battle.
in a 5-year battle, I ended up having to present my case to 7 on Your Side, and having Kathy Phillips at the time come to my home and start knocking on some doors to assist me in trying to get an accessible testing site. So it was really, really crazy at the time, and I really didn't know where to go, what to do. But once I got the okay to take the exam, I was really, really happy just to be able to take it, forget passing the exam and trying to, better myself. It was about, how could you tell me that you can't accommodate a testing site that's wheelchair accessible? That's absurd. I can't be the only person with a disability in New York City that would like to take something as simple as a GED. And at this point, I thought to myself, it's not about the exam, it's about the accessibility. Look at the day and time that we live in, and it goes to show you that there's still so much more work that we have to do in our community to let people know that we're here and we're here to stay. And every day, there is someone new coming into our community with a disability who may need, these accommodations.
And the examples, right? Somebody opening that doorway,
Exactly.
blazing a path, so that
Exactly.
they don't have to do the same.
Why weren't, if I may ask, why weren't they legally required to make it accessible?
To be honest with you, I don't know. I had gone at the time to a location called Opportunities for a Better Tomorrow. Their location was accessible, however, the location that you actually are to schedule to take your exam could be any New York City public high school. However, it does not have to be barrier-free for wheelchair users to access. So in this case, I had to go to the Board of Ed and ask them to provide me with a listing of locations that would be, but no one was willing to take me on.
So I think part of what you're talking about here is that I think they sometimes rely, bureaucracies sometimes rely on the ignorance of people. The fact that you wouldn't have that answer right at your fingertips, and so they think they can stonewall you until you'll go away.
I think ultimately at the end, they expected that I would back down and just give up, and thankfully I didn't. I did get my GED in July of 2010, and I am a college student. So, and
And you should tell them what you're doing and what you're doing now.
And what I'm doing now is I'm a intake and enrollment coordinator at Independence Care System. I also am the founder and facilitator of the Women's Empowerment Initiative. And I've also gave birth to a baby girl a year ago. She turned 1 on Friday, and I'm returning back to school after a year tomorrow.
Little did you know that you getting your GED would educate so many other people.
Absolutely, absolutely. I tell you, I wouldn't want to do it again. However, I'm grateful for the experience because I can help others as far as maybe telling them where to go so that they wouldn't have the issues that I had in terms of, you know, getting what I needed to be able to take the exam.
And Christy, would it not be a stretch to say that the obstacles you faced, the discrimination you faced, turned you into an advocate, made you an activist, and sort of maybe took you on a different path in terms of your life?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think becoming an advocate is something that's important to me, and it's definitely important to showcase to others, especially today's generation, that you have to speak up for yourself. If you don't, no one's going to do it for you the way you can do it.
I think there's a lot of mazes like that exist. I mean, that was a maze for you to sort of navigate to get to that point. And there's a lot of, I think, educational access mazes that are out there. I know in my industry, in television and film, you know, one of the staples of education is to work in the theater. And certainly if you walk around the city and go to the theater, yes, many are accessible for the audience, but as far as a training ground for people, there's a lot of closed doors out there because they're just not accessible because the theaters are so old. They're just not accessible to performers, people who want to get into performance, to get on stage and work in a space. And a classic example is Ali Stroker, who was just in, she was the first wheelchair user, Broadway singer, to be in Spring Awakening, to be on Broadway. The Nederlander organization built her a dressing room accessible to the stage, so she could go to and fro with ease and use restroom facilities with ease. But that is a rare thing, and it took a corporation as big as the Nederlander organization to do such a thing. But there has to be an educational awareness out there given to theater owners that they need to start doing this, because as is my passion in discussing people with disabilities being on film, we can't get to the place where we are respected as actors with a background until we have full access across the board, and that starts with access to education.
Right, and access right to the same jobs and opportunities to actually do those jobs. So the
argument is a lot of times that they don't have the experience, or they don't have the
how you
tools.
Get the experience?
Yeah, they can't get the experience if they can't get the education, or if they can't go to the auditions, and certainly they're not going to. So it's sort of a vicious circle that occurs, and it starts dead center with the ignorance around it.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about that ignorance. Because I think it's really important. I know that New York City now, with its Department of Cultural Affairs, is working to integrate disability into sort of all aspects of cultural affairs. And I think that's a great leap forward. It shows that disability, folks with disabilities aren't just passive in terms of audience, but they want to be performers, the writers, the directors, all aspects of whatever that cultural landscape should be. And I wonder if each of you could give an example of, in terms of your understanding of what's been done because of advocates like Christy and Hannah, what's the most important thing that you think has happened in recent years?
That's a tough question. I mean, you can go like very micro. I mean, on a small scale, I think seeing every time a person with disability enters any space, whether it's myself at a city office, or, like I said, in film and industry, there are huge changes that happen one by one. Every time we're there, the culture changes. On a much larger scale, I think over the last, I've been here 13 years, I think the government has gotten a better idea of what we need. I think there's been some progress. I know that it can be very difficult for the government at times to regulate and implement things in a way that really impact us positively. But I think the conversations are happening. There's more conversation about inclusion, diversity, employment, equal access, things like that. I mean, from working there and from also being an advocate, I mean, I hear it more and more. They don't have all the answers or all the solutions, but for me, I think it's a major victory to see that the conversation's going on louder than I believe it ever has. I mean, big ticket items, like even I work for the TLC, 50% taxi accessibility. I mean, those are huge cultural changes more than they are. Infrastructure is a big part, but culturally, to know that you might be able to get a taxi one day on that.
And we're talking, how many taxis in New York City?
13,000.
13,000, right? Now, when I first started working back in New York City at the Disabilities Network of New York City around 2006, there were 25 wheelchair accessible taxis. That tells you how far we can go in a short amount of time.
Right, and I think there are some good examples. I mean, I think aside from the government thinking about what is best for us, because obviously it's in the government's interest for us to be employed and integrated, I think the private sector really needs to focus more on it. Corporations, other companies. I mean, we are not included that much. I mean, right now, take a person like myself. I'm the accessibility manager for the TLC. Take a person like, I believe, Jim, who's going to be on this panel. He's the diversity coordinator at Chase. People with disabilities are being hired for diversity, disability-related positions, which is great. At least we're getting in there, and they're talking about it. But if you think about it, how many people with disabilities are the senior vice president of technology, or things unrelated to disability? And it's really not happening yet. I believe that, sure, you get myself or get any one of us into an organization, the culture starts to change. But it really takes years and years and more people in regular employment positions, not just those related to what we are.
So two things I'm hearing out of you. First is it's important to show up, to be a presence, a thorn in the side if need be, but certainly be seen, heard, recognized wherever these decisions are being made, right? The adage for disability has traditionally been sort of adopted, nothing about us without us, and I see that slowly evolving into nothing without us, period. Right? And that there are no areas that we should be left out of.
Right, and every big or small place that you are in, make a change. When I was in law school, I didn't make a change to the law school curriculum. I didn't change the law school, but when I left, there was 12 more push panels, accessible doors than there was before I got there. And they look at it like there's not a lot of people in wheelchairs there, so never had.
Wonder why that is.
Exactly.
Right. It goes back to Anna's point about the curb cuts.
Right. And they didn't think about it, but when I got there, every semester we had a talk, and I was like, 2 here, 2 there, 2 there, and they were willing to work with me. So it's a small change, but it's kind of the way you have to approach this. Big, overarching changes take lots of mini baby steps to get there.
Yeah. Sure.
Sure.
What would
I
you-
forgot I had my own mic. Sorry. So actually, the education aspect made me think about. I think I think I was in kindergarten when it was about a year before the ADA came into effect, and I was going to a school right across the street from my house called PS6, and I loved being there. I had 2 boyfriends that I got to choose between. I was having the time of my life, and they told me I couldn't legally stay because they didn't have an elevator or ramps or anything that would. So I was climbing the stairs every day, and I wasn't supposed to. And I realized how much I haven't had to face a lot of those physical accessibility issues because I will cheat and take the stairs. But it's not until I started hanging out with my friends in wheelchairs on a regular basis and being like, wait, we can't go to this restaurant? Like what? And then when I went to Wesleyan, I didn't realize that was going to be revolutionary in any way. But my mom got there and said, well, how have you dealt with other students, with physical disabilities before? And they said, we haven't. So they got me, a public safety guy to take me to and from class. And I would take the stairs when I had to. And But what was great is that a year or two later, another person with a physical disability also joined me on campus. And so I realized that, yeah, sometimes it does take one person, you know, to break through, and then the rest can, you know, funnel in. And, you know, that is a campus, in their defense, that was built in the 1800s. So there's a lot of things that they had to consider for those old landmark buildings as well. So, you know, they did the best they could with my situation. But, you know, I think it takes that first person, even if you don't realize, you may not know that you're the first person in a
Like,
particular
Christy,
organization.
you didn't anticipate a 7-year battle, right, when you went to take the...
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just being present, and you know, I think that it doesn't have to be, you know, I used to think that everybody else was making a difference, so I didn't have to. But I didn't realize that just being here, we can make that difference. And so I think it can be small steps to make big change.
Yeah, showing up. Again, Danny, is there a leap forward that you...
Well, I was just going to say, speaking to what you were saying about, you know, hiring a disabled person to play the disabled role, right, in the company or organization, it's very prevalent in my industry that the characters with disability are part of the story in the sense that their disability is part of the story. And so we're very much pushing this other agenda where a character with disability is a character who's part of the story, but their disability is not necessarily part of the story. To more
You could be the
normalize-
shopkeeper...
Exactly, the
Whatever.
person next door, the pizza delivery guy, whatever, you know. So that's one of the things we're doing at the Ruderman Family Foundation. We have the television challenge to try to get casting
Talk a little bit about that.
producers. Okay, you
Step
go
up.
over it. But did you say talk about it, or you
Yeah,
go
yeah,
over it?
talk about
Okay.
it,
So the Ruderman TV Challenge is a challenge that we've issued to producers and directors and casting directors to hire people with disabilities, to bring us into the hiring process, to give us an opportunity that they haven't given us before. And we hope to award that person with a badge of honor, as it were. There's no money involved, but we would like you to just sort of take it upon yourselves to integrate people with disabilities into the workforce, contrary to what you've been doing in the past. And I think another big thing this year was to be publicly mocked. I think that was a major turning point for people with disabilities in this country, in any country really. To have that happen and to have the outcry about it go on and linger and last, and to have other people, you know, the very overrated Meryl Streep speak up about it, is a turning point in my mind. And I think that kind of vigilance, not accepting that, I mean, we all know what the bully looks like. We all know what the mockery looks like. There's no backpedaling on that in any way. And I think our vigilance is so important, to not accept the explanation, but to only accept maybe the apology.
Exactly,
Yeah.
maybe.
Thank you. Anna?
Yeah, I just, you're messing them all up. I know, is that all right?
Yeah, it's working. Okay.
I think just picking up again on Danny's comment about Meryl Streep. And where I sit, that's not enough. Where I sit, people with disabilities were the only group that had been in any way, I'm going to use the word offended because I can't think of the worst egregious word, but anyway, by any of Donald Trump's. By the president's stuff. But we were not out there. We were not, you know, there was none of us were there on our own saying, how dare you? How dare you? There was no anger. There was no any of that. And that, I must tell you, bothers me. So when Meryl Streep got up there and did her shtick, which she did very well. But to me, it was like, I don't want anybody doing this for me. This is not,
Somebody holding the door.
This is not,
open for you. Yeah.
exactly.
Right.
This is not somebody, I don't want anybody, what's the word, patting me on the head and saying, for you, and that shouldn't have happened. That's not where I am. So, guys, through all of this, I have to say, and I'm including myself, it is a journey to be out there visible to the world, and to say, this is my fight. What you're doing is wrong. What you're saying is wrong. You're ignoring me. It's very contrary to the stereotype that people have of us. As kind of passive and
Well, I think
recipients of charity.
one of the things I've sort of noticed through time, right, is, and I think this is an example, ReelAbilities is an example, this panel is an example, is the power of community, the power of people coming together. The thing that always seems to happen, I think for a lot of us growing up, is we're sort of shoehorned into that notion of trying to be as normal as possible.
Absolutely.
Whatever the heck that is.
Right.
And what the effect of that is it keeps us from connecting with other disabled people, keeps us from getting ticked off, keeps us from organizing, keeps us from making changes.
Right.
So as long as we're trying to become something that we're never going to be,
Right.
we're never going to organize and make those changes, right? So, disability used to be a diagnosis. Now it's an identity, it's a community, it's a history, and it's a constituency.
And yay.
We're good at that.
Absolutely.
And it's advertising dollars. It's also advertising dollars. This 20% makes up billions in discretionary spending. So remember that our pocketbooks is also our protest.
Right, yeah, and we can use it, yeah.
But also I'd say that what's not working for me always motivates me to do more and focus on what's possible. And I think sometimes it's really easy to get stuck in what's not happening, and so we don't make things happen. So the onus is really on us. I had a girl who called me. She's a friend of mine, and she looks at my Facebook and she's like, "Sean, you're doing so much. I'm not doing anything. Like, I don't mean to say this, but why aren't I involved?" And I said, "Listen, how old are you?" She's 23, and at 23, I wasn't doing anything except living my life, which is what I thought I had to do. But it starts with finding that purpose, and often that purpose is in the things that aren't being done or said, and that's okay. It can motivate us. It should galvanize us to make that change. So,
yeah, very important.
You can start anytime, by the way.
Right now.
Yeah, right. Which goes back to what Victor was saying about, as he's saying now, wrap it up.
I didn't say anything.
What Victor was saying about reaching the youth, reaching the young people in our collective fold.
So I wanted to give you a chance to answer that question if you can think of it.
I was just going to say that I think it begins with us. This community, today's generation, unfortunately, I find that we're not doing enough to, stand up and stand out. So, publicly I'll say it today, let's begin to do that so that we know our voices are heard. Unfortunately, nothing's going to be done if we don't speak up for ourselves.
Right. In your example, your life proves that, right? So I want to make sure the folks out there, how much time do we have? 10 minutes? 5 minutes? Something? Okay. Somebody got a mic for the audience? Are we taking questions? All right, let's take some questions.
Hi. Thank you guys. This is just awesome. I have a question about. So I have my own mentoring program. I'm a former Miss Wheelchair New York 2016 title holder. And by the way, your new reigning one is here somewhere. I don't know.
Yes.
But with my mentoring program that I started, I try to get them to do advocacy. I try in small ways. And as Christy mentioned, as I believe Victor mentioned, I just can't get them motivated. So what would be your advice? To help them, to get them to do what everybody in this room is trying to do, to raise them. I don't know. And I can't force them. but I want them. Thanks.
Can you find a law? How about that, they're breaking?
Well, I would say that I think advocacy is kind of a calling in a way, and sometimes you have to nourish that calling. And to nourish that calling, you know, at the organization we have a lot of advocates, some of them who aren't naturally advocates, to connect it to real life. Like, for example, you might be helping someone who's stuck in an apartment, right? And you want somebody you're working with to help them get out. How do you bring that person to the same place where the person you're trying to help is? In a way where it becomes natural for them to advocate, where you're not asking people to, hey, I need you to go advocate for this guy. I want it. You need them to feel what you feel already, and bridging that gap, finding that connection, whether it's finding a unique way to get all the people in the same space, finding the person that you're trying to become an advocate to feel the pain of the person that you're trying to help. Some way, none of us could do what we do if we didn't relate in some way, and if it didn't in some way feel it in here to be a passion. And that's what I would say when you're mentoring people to be advocates, they have to feel it, and you have to use everyday circumstances to get them there.
We have to take the focus off ourselves. I think that's important too.
You have to want to bring change.
Excuse me, but have Edison said, start with, have you been discriminated against? And start with that. Or they all in denial, number one, or do they see themselves as disabled? They have like, I hate to say this, God, but and I won't say just them, but a lot of people have this entitlement kind of thing, and they don't want to work. Why? Why should I have to do this? Until it directly affects them. And it should happen before that.
Before the wake-up call.
Yes.
Before the personal incident.
Yes.
Right.
And I try to say that to people, not just my group. I don't want to sing a lot of
Don't be gentle. Don't be gentle with them.
Okay.
I mean, if you find yourself trying to talk them into it, I mean, you know, get in their face. I mean, this isn't a time for them to be, you know, like everyone else.
Maybe I was being a little too flip with the law, but it can be done softly. Whatever the law, look, there, and maybe, and also maybe I'm a little over the top with this, but I was not in the streets protesting for, you know, this is real. This was real discrimination. And to get those damn laws on the books and real took a lot. We haven't used them. We have not used these laws. So when, I mean, if they're getting any kind of federal funding, then they cannot discriminate. I mean, I'm not as, I'm sure the ADA would apply to them as well. And you can say that, you know, you're breaking the law. Let's look at how we can approach this. Let's look at how we can make this not, you know, make this inclusive. That's what ADA is all about. That's what, you know, Section 504 is all about. All of the anti-discrimination is to be inclusive. We're talking about diversity. This is a big thing now in our world. You know, I can tell you now that disabled people are not going to be heard in the same way that other groups are. They're not now, and it won't be, and we won't be heard unless we're the ones who talk.
Yeah,
And this
I think
idea
you're
that things
absolutely right.
can be
People
taken
have-
away, you know, things can be taken away. So if we don't keep standing up, you know, slowly, you know, all of these things that benefit us will start to get chipped away. I mean, they're already looking at education and chipping that away right now by rescinding the 1965 law about education. They're already chipping away at it. So what they think they have can easily all go away.
So you get that privilege you're talking about, right? People won't think about it until it's gone. I think it also begins with how we think about communities, how we think about words, and how we relate to them. So, for example, like I just said, disability used to be a diagnosis, now it's much more, right? We got to think about it in that way. I think we also have to think that, you know, the phrases, you know, are part of a community that's bigger than us, and also that a need, this is very important, a need isn't special if other people get to take the same thing for granted, right? So that's education, employment, basic respect. So if there's nothing special about getting the same things that everybody else already has, and I think we need to talk about it in that way. Because until we do, it's going to be seen as something they're doing out of charity. for our benefit. We gotta fight for it, right? You gotta push for it and say, no, I deserve it.
I want to piggyback on what you just said, actually, because I think maybe advocacy can seem like a capital A word for a lot of people. Maybe it starts with saying, well, what do you want to do with your life? What, in terms of finding a job, because it also relates to what Alex was saying. Sometimes advocacy is just being the first one in the room. It doesn't have to be, a red carpet event for someone to be there. They're just showing up in their life. Whether they're interested in computer science or art, being that first person in that room just because they love it, that's advocacy too. Because I think these are all great big things, but sometimes it's because they're big that we're afraid to tackle them. But if we can at least get them started in thinking about what they're passionate about, I think that passion will lead them to advocacy. And also just knowing your example is shining bright for your mentees to see. And they may not be ready now, but if you keep nurturing them at that right time, let's say they do find a career they want, but maybe there's not, sort of like what Christy went through, maybe there's not everything they need, they will get there, So I would be as patient as possible, and just keep being you and keep supporting them in the way you're doing. But also to encourage them to seek out whatever their purpose is, and that purpose can evolve over time into advocacy.
Sometimes it does take a long time for, one to realize this is something that I want to do, and that sense of entitlement to, now you be able to pay that kind of stuff forward. So keep trying.
Yeah, thank you. We got time for one more question?
Yes, Christy, when you said that you spent 5 years fighting the New York City Board of Education to be able to wheel your wheelchair in and take an exam at an accessible school, but let me tell you about me. On June 26, 2010, I retired from the New York City Board of Education after filing 3 lawsuits with my head held high, saying my advocacy work was going to continue. And now I'm in a course at CUNY School of Professional Studies to work in special services in higher education. And my advocacy work will continue to go on, because it's another thing now I have to change to show that they are there to help to provide accommodations to students who have disabilities. And they're not even doing that at the City University, whether you take classes actually there or online. So I believe if you have advocacy work in one part of your life, it will go on.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Hi, I wanted to say that my situation, I'm disabled too. I'm young. I'm talking to Victor specifically. Kind of, I would advocate, but I just don't know what to do. So I'm asking. The member, okay.
But she brings up a good point. It can sometimes be hard to know what advocacy is. It does sound like a big A word, you know what I mean? And advocacy sometimes is a small thing. It's sometimes somebody's scared to go up to the supervisor, or somebody's scared to make the phone call, or somebody's and doing that on someone's behalf in many ways is advocacy, you know what I mean? Or showing someone, hey, what you're looking for, this is the website, this is the section of rules and regs that points to it. So you start small by just facing the issues that are around you, but it can be a difficult thing to figure out how to do.
I would say do what you feel compelled to do. Whatever it is you feel compelled to do, that's going to be advocacy, because you're bringing yourself to it. And so, that purpose that John keeps talking about, that's really important. So whatever you're motivated to do, make sure you can do that. And if somebody tries to stop you from doing that, boom, you've got their hook. Right?
Showing up, too. Showing up at things like this, but also showing up where you think they should be talking about. As I was just at an event regarding protecting vulnerable communities at CAA just last week.
Tell them what CAA is.
CAA is the biggest agency in Los Angeles, and they have a foundation, and they had a whole thing on, it's sort of a symposium about sort of the political climate and where things are going, and a lot of it was talk of advocacy, and there was a whole a whole talk about protecting vulnerable communities, and the communities included in this call, in this 45-minute talk, people of color, people of different faiths, and the LGBTQ community and gender. So that's what this talk included. There was no mention of disability whatsoever. And so standing up is important in those moments, standing up and saying something, and saying, hey, you've left 20% of the population out of this discussion. You've left this protected vulnerable community out of the discussion. How dare you is very important. So sometimes just showing up somewhere and making sure your voice is heard is all it takes.
That's right, because we've got to understand. To go back to Anna's point, I think, with the law, is that the law is called the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's not the Americans with Special Needs Act. It's not the Americans with Physical Differences Act. It's not the Americans with whatever. It's the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so if you want to be protected, you got to own the word. And in order to own the word, you got to say the word. And then when you do that, it's bigger than one of us. It's all of us. Together. Say the word.
Folks, before we finish up, it's my chance to give our plug here at ReelAbilities. I'm Isaac Zabaki. I'm the director and co-founder of ReelAbilities. And we definitely see our mission here as part of this mission. And as advocates, I got into this actually from the film direction, but very quickly, especially now, feel that there's such a great importance to be advocates, and that's one of the reasons why it's so important for us to have this panel here today. But I want to see, next time we do this, I want to see this theater full. I want to see the entire community coming out. And when I say the entire community, I mean ReelAbilities also does try to bridge gaps, so it's both the disability community and those who are connected to the disability community, which is absolutely everyone. Or not connected. Well,
everybody here, next time, drag 2 people with you. At least, 2 people with you.
And we see this. We see this with the films. I mean, we screen here at the JCC a ton of films throughout the years, and I have to say that I'm going to say something controversial now, but disability films, the Disability Film Festival is one of our hardest sells. And this is where we have a built-in huge community. That shouldn't be that case. As everybody's saying here, you need to step up. You need to be a part of things. You need to show up. And we need to make some noise. I think that is a crucial part of all this. I mean, people here mentioned also the Oscars. The Oscars are overlooked, have I think made up for some of their mistakes this year, or tried very hard to compensate for that. And the Oscars, I'll admit here, did not accept ReelAbilities as a festival to include their short films as a recognized Academy program. This is something that they've accepted. Festivals that show much fewer films about other minorities. This is a. Let's make some noise about that. But we have here a week where we're trying to make some noise and bring the community together. So please join us today. I'll just mention coming up here. We have a busy day. At 2 p.m. we're showing the film Rebound about that. I mean, some of the folks here from Rebound, right? This is Lawrence, you saw this film, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we see a lot of sports films.
But it's a cut above those sport films. It's really amazing.
They have movies I've never seen. I'm on the film selection committee, so I've seen all the films, but Rebound was definitely one of my favorites.
4 p.m. we're screening At Eye Level, a father-son story, a German film that really speaks universally. Fabulous film. 6 p.m. Carte Blanche, and then we finish, that's a Polish film about a man losing his eyesight, and then at 8:30 p.m. actually, it's been changed, we're screening the film My Hero Brother, an Israeli documentary. So it's a busy, busy day, and I know you have busy lives, but we hope you can show up for as many as possible, but if not, you need to tell your friends to come out to it. So help spread the word, and we're here till Wednesday night. I want to thank our fabulous panel here. Thank you for keeping everyone in line. Victor, of course, Victor Felici, thank you for being here and introducing. And finally, of course, our partners here at ICS, thank you so much for bringing us all together. Thank you all. Keep talking. Thank you.